You're watching Inside iOS Dev, your favorite show about real world iOS development.
Hi, you're about to listen to a podcast interviewing Robert Martin. Many of you know him as Uncle Bob. To me, he's Dad, but I'm here to let you know about an upcoming course that he's offering to the public via Zoom. It's called the Clean Code Architecture and Design Master Course for software developers. In this course, he's talking about architecture, solid principles, design patterns, and so much more. We meet every week on Wednesdays for 2 hours for 13 weeks. And upon completion of the course, we send you a certificate with CEUs. All of these sessions are recorded and available for participants at the end of the course. Find out more information at cleancodemastercourse2023.eventbrite.com. Enjoy the interview.
Well, today, guys, we have a very, very, very special guest, one and only, legendary Robert Uncle Bob Martin. How are you doing, Bob?
I'm well, thank you.
So today is going to be a little bit of a different conversation for us, more not about iOS or less about iOS and more of a general development and practices and process and interacting with people, I would think. So we wanted to talk to Bob about clean code, clean architecture, and its impact on businesses, developers, and customers. Because there's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, out there, and there's a lot of people just don't know about it. They think it's all about the architecture, let's say, or structure in the code, which it is, right? And Bob, you can speak more to it. But then there's broader overall impact. But then there's pushbacks from people. So we'll try to cover all of that. Let's start perhaps with, Bob, can you, I guess, let's start with even simpler introduction of yourself. I know you said you're a legendary and all, but some
heavens, yes, yeah, legendary. So I've been a programmer for over 50 years. I started writing code professionally when I was 18. Although I learned how to write code when I was 12 or 13, and that would have been in 1964. So that was a very long time ago. And I have remained in the industry for that time as a programmer. Sometimes I was managing groups, sometimes I wasn't. Sometimes I was running companies, sometimes I wasn't. But I was always a programmer, always writing code, always in the trenches, because that's my first love. I really enjoy the problem and the challenge of writing code. Been a consultant since 1990 something or other. I don't remember exactly. So 30 or 40 years of that, traveling the world, yelling at people, telling them they're doing it wrong. So that's kind of been my gig. I started writing books in 93 or 94, and I don't know how many I've written. I've written a few. They're out there now, and I just published one. It should be out in October, and the title of that book is Functional Design. So that will be design principles for functional programming and so forth, and that should be fun as well.
Much needed. Much needed. Different topic. I don't want to sidetrack. I want to ask so many things. I think one more prominent, if you will, things that you've done is the Agile Manifesto and all that movement. That I think these days it's a given, if you will. I think since when I was starting to professionally code and be employed or contracted back in 2010-ish, that was just the like, this is it. Everyone's doing Agile, right? Well, yeah. Or not well, that's a different question, but at least no one would consciously say, oh, we'll do waterfall in this project. So I think that's also sort of one of the how people might know you and your work.
Yeah, I was certainly involved with that effort. That was 20 3 years ago.
But then there is this clean code, right? And that is we have a book on that topic. So what could you give us a short, which is, I know it's hard to explain it short, but kind of overview of what that is?
So it was something that was weighing heavily on me at the time. The year is around 2004 or 2005. And I'm thinking somebody has to write a book on the best way to write code, the best way to structure code, what the rules are. And I thought, I'm not the guy to write that book because I don't have enough experience. How could anybody be arrogant enough to think that they can write a book entitled Clean Code? And I struggled with that for a long time. And then I thought, well, if I don't write it, nobody else is going to write it. So I wrote the damn book. And I laid it out early on, right in the early chapters. I said, look, this may not work for everybody. It works for me. These are my rules. You might have different rules. You might have better rules, but we can all learn from examining each other's rules. So here are mine. And that's really how the book got started. The book is a set of rules that I have compiled over, well, at the time it was 40 some odd years, and now it's 50 some odd years, and I don't think I'd change very much. So that's kind of the history and the topic of the book. It gets into the deep nitty-gritty of how you structure if statements and while statements and names and functions and classes and so on. It has a somewhat of an object-oriented bent to it, although not very much, just a little bit. And since then, I've been delving a lot into functional programming, and the latest book that I wrote, Functional Design, softens some of those rules a little bit to include functional programming as well.
Probably because functional programming needs a little help. No, sorry, my personal opinions. I will stop. There is this battle going on, of course. You of course know about it.
I know the battle. Yes, it's very silly.
Indeed. But it keeps happening. Anyway.
Yep.
So yeah, and then the clean code, it's been a very, for me personal, and I think Sandeep, for you and lots of other people, very profound book to read. And even if you do not apply all of the ideas, just some, it still gives you such a tremendous benefit to how you write code, I would think.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah,
some people disagree, but
Indeed, yeah, some people disagree, but I highly would recommend everyone to read any engineer and any specialization platform, whatever that is. It's very good. So I would think then after that, the clean architecture came, or was it before the clean code ideas, if you will?
The ideas for clean architecture were more prominent in my mind before I wrote the clean code book, because that's been a big study area of mine for several decades. But I wasn't prepared to write that book before I wrote clean code. So for some reason, that's the ordering. I wrote a book in 1995, which tried to address the architecture issue and didn't really do a good enough job. I wrote another one in 2002, which also tried to address the architecture issue, but didn't do a good enough job. And finally, I decided I just needed to write a book about architecture in particular without going into everything else.
And I think colloquially it's called the onion architecture, if I'm not mistaken, because of the diagram.
People call it all kinds of things. Onion architecture, hexagonal architecture, ports and adapters. There's a million different names. All of those structures, whether it's the one that I've been talking about or or Alistair Coburn has been talking about, or Steve Freeman, or any of these guys. They're all very similar in their intent, very similar in their structure. They differ slightly in vocabulary, but the ideas are all roughly the same.
Yeah, and I think to kind of bring it closer to home, if you will, to our audience of iOS developers, the iOS 2 implementations that are more popular of clean architecture on iOS would be Viper and RIBs. So Viper stands for View Interactor Presenter Entity Router, I believe. Right? Most of the things, plus some, as far as I recall, clean architecture. I've read a book quite some time. And then the RIBs is Router Interactor Builder. That is the Uber's implementation of it. Essentially, they took Viper, which had a lot of fluff, if you will, or a little bit too much, and too view-centric, and they cut it such that there's no view potentially. You can have your whole structure without a view, even though it's an iOS app. You'd think everything's about the view, but that is, I think, a tremendous difference and helps a lot there too.
I'm unfamiliar with either of those. It's not the domain that I live in, so it's interesting to me that there are two.
There are two.
Are they frameworks or are they ideas?
So Sandeep and I were just talking about it right before the call, because I thought you might ask that or have an opinion there. So one of them is an idea set, that's Viper. Although, unfortunately, it's very view-centric, so in my personal perspective, it couples you too much to, like, you have to have a UI in first, and then everything else happens. But it doesn't have a framework. The RIBs one, no, like, less coupling, but it gives you a framework. Although, Bob, before you say anything, I think I know what you would say. The framework is nice, and it's not Ruby on Rails style. It will not bend you to make in certain folders or stuff like that. It's nice. Even your core of it, like let's say Interactor, where the business logic lives, the framework will let you, or always, you will have to instantiate the object yourself, which means you do the dependency injection, you do all of the things, no magic. But there is a framework, technically tiny, 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 tiny one.
Okay, all right. Well,
I think the reason I kind of said all of this, I've heard one of your, I believe it was a lecture or a talk where you were giving your reasons, right, on why Ruby on Rails style of framework is probably not a good idea. And I don't know if our iOS listeners kind of get why. Maybe you could elaborate.
The Rails framework was a brilliant piece of work by David Hannemeyer Hansen almost 20 years ago. It changed the way people looked at enterprise frameworks. It had a profound effect on the industry as a whole. So I don't want to take anything away from David or Rails or anything like that. In my opinion, now looking at Rails, I think there's an architectural flaw. And the architectural flaw has to do with the way that you have to bind yourself to the framework in order to make it work. You make a really strong commitment to that framework. You have to inherit from its base classes. You have to follow all of its conventions, and it governs you with an iron fist. And if you need to break out of that iron fist, you've got hell to pay. It's not easy. So from my point of view, a good framework is one that, there's an old rock song from long ago called "Hold On Loosely But Don't Let Go." A good framework is a loose set of rules that you can violate easily, but you can fit within it well, and it doesn't let go of you.
Yeah, indeed. I think personally for myself, it was good for professional growth to go through the Ruby on Rails boot camp, if you will, for several years.
Sure.
I learned so many good practices, conceptual thinking of, well, test driven development, test first, and fantastic. It's craft the code, make it nice, read it. Again, all of what Clean Book says, it is all tied together. But as you said, at some point you realize, oh, it's a box fist that has a tight grip on you, and you're just, I think you outgrow it eventually, sort of.
Yeah, I think everybody does. At some point, you're going to want to do something that the framework doesn't like. And at that point, you're fighting against it, and it's hard to fight against it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much more to talk about. Maybe some other time. Okay, so to get us back on the track of our topic. So then those two things, right? There's the clean code, the clean architecture. They seem to be helping to craft better code, make better software, better applications. Now, but then what is the impact? How do they help businesses, developers, customers? I guess, well, yeah. What is that impact that they bring?
That's the entire point of those books. And all of the books that I write, the entire point is to make it easier for businesses to produce software that make them profit or save them money. That's what software is. The reason we have software is to save or make money for businesses. That's the only reason we have software, right? And anything that I have written is in an effort to increase that ability, increase the ability for businesses to make or save money. Why is it that clean code or clean architecture would achieve that goal? And the answer to that is that businesses waste an immense amount of money struggling over poorly structured, badly written batches of code that programmers cannot keep in their head and are constantly mucking around with and screwing up and messing up, and they've got no way out of the mess they've put themselves into. So the fundamental rule that covers all of these books, and it's a rule that it took me 25 years to learn, was the only way to go fast is to do a good job. The only way to go fast is to go well. And that's kind of a rule that your grandmother tried to teach you when you were little. It's not a new rule.
There isn't much new under the sun, right? Is that what I said?
There's nothing new under the sun.
Indeed. Yeah. Well put, of course. And so I think that said, and we will, and three of us on the call and many other people understand that, but quite often there's other groups of people that do not get this idea. And I think this is where Sandeep and I can have lots of anecdotes and examples of, management specifically pushing back on it, and business stakeholders, even developers themselves, unfortunately. And Sandeep, I don't know where you kind of want to take it from here. We can have examples, I guess, first, to just take it closer to home for people, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, we believe in the advantages of clean code and the clean architecture, and we envision what Bob is saying, that having clean code will definitely prove good for the businesses. But there is always a pushback from the management that why do we need to write a good code, or they will not say directly like that why do we need to write the good code, but they will say that why do you want to follow this path if it can be achieved in this way? Why do we want to why we want to do it in that way? Or let's say when you inherit the legacy code base, that code base was not practicing the clean code techniques or principles, or even the solid principles. And when we touch that code base, we want to write the clean code. We may want to refactor something, because to either to fix a bug or to ship a new feature, we may be touching a few areas of the legacy code base. And that's where we ask the management, hey, we want some time to refactor around this thing. We want to write good code. We want to write clean code. But we always get a pushback. No, it will take much longer than expected because we will have some deadlines. We want to release that feature. So how do we want to address those things?
Oh, well, I mean, why does the business know what you're doing? Right? The business has no business knowing what you're doing. You're the programmers, you're the architects. You know the best way to make this work. You know the way to go fastest. You have the charter to go fast. You know what the business wants. You know the business wants it fast. Why do you have to ask permission for anything? Why do you ask the business if it's okay if we do X? You shouldn't be asking that question. You should just do X. If X is the best way to go, do X. Don't tell your boss what you're doing. That's not the boss's business. That's your business. When programmers ask, what they're doing is they're moving the risk from themselves to their boss, because the programmer doesn't want to carry the risk. The boss doesn't want to carry the risk either. The boss is not going to say, well, okay, I accept your risk. And if you go longer, well, then it's my fault. No, the boss is not going to do that, right? So if you're a programmer and if you have integrity, you look at what needs to be done and you take the risk. And you don't ask for permission. You don't say, well, we need another 2 weeks to refactor. We need another month to redesign. You don't say all that stuff. You just give them an estimate, say, this is how long it's going to take, and then you go. And you do what you have to do to get the job done in the fastest amount of time, which most of the time, that means you're going to be refactoring and testing and cleaning things up and working in a way that allows you to be efficient long-term.
Well, that sounds good, and that definitely sounds
Sounds great,
definitely
doesn't it?
makes.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that definitely makes sense to me as a developer. But how would I convince the management to give me more time? Because they will come with the argument that they have some deadlines to ship that feature, which is really critical for the business. So how would I defend them?
Well, you don't ask for more time. They tell you how much time you've got, and you tell them how much you can get done in that amount of time. That's it, right? They say, okay, we've got a deadline, September 1st. We've got to be on the ground September 1st. And you say, okay, well, this is how much I can get done on September 1st. And they say, well, that's not enough. And you say, that's what I can do. I don't have magic pills in my pocket that can change reality. September 1st is the deadline. This is what I can get done. There's this horrible tendency. Well, let me back up a minute. Let me describe something else. Programmers are programmers because they're technically minded. We like to think in terms of reality, mathematical realities. We put logic together. We can follow a cause to an effect very easily. We find the truth through logic and reason. Managers do not. Managers find the truth a different way, or most managers. I don't want to generalize completely, but most managers find the truth through emotional confrontation. If they can confront you and get you to move, if they can confront you with a lot of, deep eye contact and stern looks and yelling and so forth, if they can do that and they can get you to move your position, change your mind, then they have found the truth. They're looking for the truth. And if you want to tell them the truth, you got to stare right back at them and say, look, September 1st, this is what we can get done. And that's a bit that programmers don't like that. Programmers don't want to get emotionally engaged. They don't want to confront their bosses. They don't want to do that. And so programmers very often will back down and they will say something non-committal, like, okay, we'll try, which is an absolute lie. You're not going to try You don't know how to try. You don't know what to do to try. You don't know how you're going to change your behavior, but you are trying to get rid of that person. So in effect, by saying, okay, we'll try, we'll do our best, sir, you are lying, and you are lying right to that guy's face. And you have to look at yourself in the mirror and realize that that's what you're doing.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's not easy. This stuff is not easy, right? You get into these battles with managers or other programmers, senior programmers or anybody else, and it's not easy. And it's not what programmers like to do. Programmers want to be at their screens, typing away and doing logical work, that, feeling the joy of seeing something run and struggling with a logical problem. They don't want to deal with a person. We didn't get into this business because we like people. And yet, getting through the problem that you're talking about is an entirely people problem. And you have to learn the art of standing your ground. I was running a group. This is 30 years ago. 30 or 40 years ago. I was running a group in England. I was in England for a year running a group there. And I had a responsibility to one of our customers, and I built a plan. I gave them dates. I said, okay, we're going to have X and Y done by such and such a time. And the customer was very happy and said, that's great. We've been disappointed before, but we know you're going to come through this time. And I went back to the main office and I set that program in place, a bunch of people working on tasks. And then I sat in a meeting about a week later with a bunch of my peers, other managers, and bosses above them. And they started talking about how they were going to allocate resources. And bit by bit, I could see that they were going to start raiding my resources. They were going to take people away from my project and compromise the promise that I had made to that customer. And at first I was paralyzed. I didn't know what to do about it. And in the end, I got red-faced and I stood up and I just started yelling at them all. Just yelling, you can't do this. You can't take my people. Don't you understand? This guy's going to throw a fit. And then I sat down and I thought, well, okay, I'm toast. They're going to fire me. And they all looked at me with a new respect and said, you've made a good point. I didn't make any point at all. All I did was yell. But that's what they were looking for. They were looking for the emotional confrontation coming back to them, and that's how they knew where the truth was.
The pushback, right? That is what most of the time I would think no one expects from developers.
Right. It's not in our character usually.
Yeah, but then you're right. This is how you get to the truth in this particular context and situation, right? Because unfortunately, what Bob, you were saying, like I think we all got into the business of coding, thinking we're gonna be, coding and solving puzzles and stuff and making stuff show on the screen or API calls, whatever, right? Well, we end up we do, but we end up working with people so much, huh?
All the time, yeah. And we are the people who were hired who know how to say no. We know when and how to say no. Bosses don't, managers don't. They don't know how to get to know. We know how to get to know. We also know how to get to yes. But when the answer is no, we're the only ones that can actually say that. And so we have to be able to say that.
I think for most developers, they fear their yes, one side is that we are introverted most of the time and we don't like confrontation and all of that. But I think for a lot of people, it's also, what you said actually when you stood up and confronted them, if you will, you thought you're gonna get fired, right? And I believe that's probably what's going on in most of the developers' heads when they attempt being confronted by managers and whatnot and want to say no, but they think, oh, well, if I say no, I'm fired, right? Or something like that.
Yeah. And that is the risk. I mean, you might get fired. It is the risk. But if you're a professional, it's a risk you have to take. The worst thing you can do is go along with a bad decision that you know is bad, and you don't fight against it, because now you're complicit. If you say yes when you know the answer is no, then you are complicit in whatever failure happens after that.
Sometimes we also get in pushback from the management that we are in the growing phase and it's critical not to touch those parts of the code base right now. What if something breaks? So that also pushes the developers to not do the refactoring, or to put it well, to actually not do the clean code.
Yes, it does. Clearly, if you are worried about it breaking, you don't have tests. So this is a system which was written without tests, and now, of course, if you touch it anywhere, you might break it, and that's awful. And the best way to deal with that is very, very gently. So I would not advise the programmers to ask for time to do any refactoring in the messy code itself, or in the old code, or in the untested code. Instead, what I would suggest is that every time you are in that code, for any reason at all, do one small act of kindness to it, make it a tiny little bit better, not a lot better. Don't risk anything. Just do one gentle thing, change the name of one variable, take one large function and split it into two littler ones, something like that, just something gentle, and walk away. Check it in and walk it away. This is a rule that I call the Boy Scout rule. Always check the code in better than you checked it out, always. And if everybody just did that, then the code base would very gradually get better and better with time without enduring any significant risk. The problem with that, of course, is that it takes time, but that's okay. You've got time. If you're going to get this thing clean, it's going to take a long time. Don't ask for that time, just gentle changes. As the code base gradually improves, it will improve only in those areas that you are actively working on. The other areas of the code that are a mess, you just leave them be. They've been working for a long time. They're going to keep on working. Don't reach into areas that you don't touch every day and start mucking around in there. Bit by bit, the volatile areas of the code, the parts that you're changing, are going to get better, a little better, and maybe better enough to add a test. Put one test in. Don't put 20. Put one test in, check it in, go away. The next person is going to put one test in, check it in, and go it away. And over time, you'll start accumulating some tests. The more tests you have, the easier it is to refactor, the easier everything gets. Don't rush this. It's going to take months. It's going to probably take years. But that's the best way to deal with a very old and crufty and messy code base that you feel the strong desire to go in and fix it, and don't do that. Never, never, never ask the management to give you 3 months to clean everything up, because it'll take much more than 3 months. You will wreck the code in the process. Management will hate you forever. You'll hate yourself forever. That project will fail. Don't start a project to clean the code.
I have so many anecdotes and battle stories about that. I will spare you guys. And wow, of course, you have even more. But what is currently, I suppose, present for me is an interesting thing, which I haven't seen at other teams before as much. There is a tendency there is time allowed by the management for refactoring, actually, surprising enough. The management's complying, if you will, or trying to help, seemingly. They let us create the tickets for that tech debt, right, to address. Yeah. And then quite often there is new feature built, let's say, and there is an opportunity to refactor what you were just saying, Bob. It's like, all right, this I'm touching this yet again, this piece of the application. I can clean up like a little bit, just like there's a method to reuse from another module. I can put it in and import and boom, right? I don't have to copy paste. Then the developers say, oh, well, we'll have a refactoring ticket for that. This is not part of the implementing this. We'll just have a ticket and do it later. Guess what? And of course, Bob, you're laughing. Of course, you know what happens. Those tickets are not worked on ever. They're buried in a graveyard of dead, I don't know what that is, work.
You never schedule refactoring. You don't write those tickets. That's when you write a refactoring ticket, what you are really saying is, I'm never doing this. That's all that means. Because we always say to ourselves, well, we'll go back and fix this later. But that later never comes. We never go back and fix those things. Refactoring is something you do all the time, minute by minute, right? You write a little code, you clean it up. You write a little bit more code, you clean it up. You're constantly in this mode of refactoring and cleaning. You never ask for permission. You never schedule it. The word refactoring should never appear on any schedule, ever. There comes times, I'm in the middle of this right now, there come times when something happens in the code base and you realize that you have the wrong design. And you're going to have to do a larger refactoring. You don't ask for time to do that. You also don't stop and just do it. You're going to have to gradually integrate that refactoring change, that larger refactoring change, into the ongoing project, little by little, making small changes, moving the design in the direction you want, while you are also doing real features and real bug fixes and real code programming that the business wants. You never stop the business's need to satisfy something you think you need to do in the code, but you always gradually move the code in the direction you want it to go.
Indeed. I think what I found just interesting, kind of, I'm thinking about it, it's a little easier to do that, gradually refactor, gradually change as you code up new features or fix bugs, right? Bugs are, I think, a very good opportunity, in my opinion, to do slightly bigger refactor, because a bug happened for a reason, probably because of the architectural misconceptions.
Yeah.
But I found it to be easier to do, let's say you inherit a legacy code base, and a lot of us do, when there is no developers who built it in the first place, like around and at the company. Because when they are there, then there's just this, oh, why are you changing this? It was fine type of feedback. And I mean, I'm exaggerating, but.
Well, you might be exaggerating, but yeah, I've certainly experienced that very directly. Right? You change some code that some guy feels ownership of, and that guy comes down on you and says, oh, what'd you change that for? But that leads to another issue, which is that nobody owns their code, right? The code belongs to the business. The code belongs to the team. And so I have been very fortunate in my life to have never had to work for very long at a company where people owned their code. We all shared, almost every place I worked, we all shared ownership of the code. So anybody could go into any part of the code and make any change they needed to make, right? So you can't go into Bob's code, you can't go into Bill's code. I never had to work in that kind of environment for very long. When I became a consultant, I ran across an awful lot of that. And it's always dysfunctional and it always causes problems. And it's one of the things that I would work inside that company to change. Collective ownership is one of the agile rules, right? Collective ownership, something that we should all practice.
Yeah, I think Sandeep and I were just talking about it before the call, with assigning tickets and managers not liking pair programming because they say you're what was it, Sandeep, your two resources, you should be doing 2 tickets type of message.
Right.
It's silly to me. Like I again, I guess by the virtue of from day one of my professional career, agile was the thing for well done agile or not, but it was the thing. So pair programming was a given, and I like, to me it's no, like that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I am assigned, the ticket is assigned to me. I'm driving it, sure. I might solicit help, right? And then I'll help the other developer too with his ticket. Not a big deal, but it's interesting.
It shouldn't be a big deal, but there are people who look at that and think, well, that's a waste of time and effort. And of course it isn't. You know, if there were an emergency, you know, there's a production outage and it's because of something in the software, you would expect a bunch of people around a monitor all working together, you know, pairing and collaborating and mobbing on the problem. If that's the most efficient way to solve the problem, why isn't that always the most efficient way? What is it about, you know, working individually that is somehow more efficient than working together as a group? Now, I like pairing. I do it when I can. It is not something that you have to do 100% of the time, or even 50% of the time, right? The reason that we do pair programming is to gain a little efficiency. It does help you go faster. Sometimes it makes you go slower. You know, it all balances out. But the most important reason for doing pair programming is to share knowledge. If you know what's going on in my code today, and I know what's going on in your code today, we all have a much better picture of the system as a whole, and that makes us all go faster. We all can judge, okay, oh, that's going on over there, this is going on over here, I can do this over here, blah, blah, blah. And we all work as a team as opposed to a bunch of individual units. So I think some pairing is important. 100% pairing is not. You know, there are things that are much better to do alone. Like if you're doing a list of error messages, probably better to do that one alone. But there's lots of there have been times when I have paired on a really complicated problem, and the two of us, you know, working together on this complicated problem, could not make progress because we interfered with each other. We couldn't make it work, and then we'd split. And we'd each solve the problem independently, and then we'd come back together and go, oh, your solution is better than mine. And then we would continue from there.
It's interesting. I haven't had that one before, but I did have like a pair program for a couple of days, split up, then pair program again, split up for a few days. That makes sense.
Clean code is expensive. How would I justify as a developer or as a consultant for a business?
So what's the question?
I guess the question is like, clean code is expensive, right? Like it's more work upfront, if you will. That's the perception. How would you justify to the business that, like, invest in that time? But then Sanjeev, well, like, what do you mean by that, right? If we don't tell him, right, you just do it.
Yeah, if I'm working as a full-time employee, I may not tell them. When I'm hired as a consultant for a specific project, they will ask me the upfront cost of that project, right? So I will have to justify, okay, so I will work these many hours on this project, because if they ask, okay, why would it take so much time? Our previous consultant was doing it in half the time. Why would you require this much time? So I would need to justify that situation. Okay, I'm going to use clean code. I'm going to refactor some of your code and so on.
Well, I would advise you against doing that. If you have decided that the best way to proceed is to use 10 hours, and they come back and say, wow, we had a guy who could do this in 5 hours. Your answer to that is, no, you didn't. Nobody's ever done this before. And if you think that other guy can do it in 5 hours, you should go back and hire him, because this is going to take me 10 hours. Yeah. Again, you don't want to introduce reasons why that you think it's going to take longer, because that opens them up to be able to say, well, then don't do that. The other thing about that is that you should not be thinking that the refactoring and the testing is going to make it take longer. because you don't want it to take longer. You want to do the thing that's going to get things done quickest with the best result.
I want to add something to this, which ties back into what we already talked about, the courage to say no, if you will, right? And you might be fired for it, or you won't get the project, right? If you're bidding on it as a contractor and stuff like that. As Bob said, this is the risk to take, and maybe this is something that our community needs more of that message, right? There is always more jobs out there in our industry so far, right? I know maybe the day will come, it will change, but there is always more jobs. And as Bob said, like, we're the professionals. We know what is the right thing to do. Do you want to compromise your own integrity and not do it and say, no, okay, fine, I'll do it in 5 hours, and you write sloppy code, and I don't want to. I think maybe when I was a junior, I was hungry, let's just say, maybe literally, right? I needed money. I needed to have the project, go to me and get paid and all that. That was a brief period in my life. And at that point, it's over. And I don't want to be doing that ever again. I don't think I'll sleep well after that.
Part of being a professional is accepting the risk of being a professional, accepting the risk of knowing when to say no, knowing how to do the best for the company, even when it's not what the company thinks they want. When you hire a lawyer, that lawyer is going to tell you how to behave. You aren't going to tell that lawyer how to behave. The lawyer is going to keep you out of jail or keep you out of paying a lot of money, and you better follow that lawyer's advice. And if you go to a doctor, you're going to do what the doctor tells you to do. You're not going to tell the doctor what to do. And it's the same with a programmer, right? A programmer who's a professional tells the business what the business needs to do, not the other way around. And there's a lot of risk associated with that. You have to be able to take that risk. And sometimes that means, looking very squarely at the chance that you're going to lose a job. And maybe there aren't a lot of jobs available. You still have to act like a professional and go, okay, I need to be able to take this risk. It's not always easy.
I understand your point when we are having this conversation with the management who might not be directly related with code and all, because we being professional, we know our job. But what about the managers or the team leads who we are reporting to, who are actually technical, who understand all such situations, but still ask, why would you like to write the clean code? How would it guarantee that this code will also not get rot like the existing code when it scales?
It's going to take a lot to unpack that one. So you've got a team lead, and the team lead, I presume the team lead is technically competent. And the team lead is looking at a plan that you've come up with and doesn't like that plan. And he doesn't like the plan or she doesn't like the plan because it involves the words clean code. Now that's
or refactor potentially, right?
Or refactoring or any of these things, right? And all right, is there a scenario where that makes sense? Is there a scenario where the team lead would come and say, we can't do this. We can't refactor this other thing over here. And we can't be focused perfectly on clean code because we've got to get this done by tomorrow at noon. Does that exist? And the answer is, yeah, from time to time, that kind of thing does exist. There are times when you've got production outages and you break every rule under the sun to fix the production outage. There are times when there are extremely short-term deadlines, and you look at those short-term deadlines and you're just going to have to make a mess because there's no way that you're going to be able to think the problem through properly to get the job done. But there's a straight line path to solving the short-term problem, and it's going to cost you later, but okay, I'm going to do that. There are times when that is the right answer. They're rare. They don't happen chronically, hopefully, but that does happen. You, as the person on the other side of that, You have to be able to acknowledge that. You have to be able to follow that reasoning. Follow the reasoning of the tech lead, understand what the tech lead is saying, and then say, okay, this time, but, and then here comes the but, right? I've got to be able to go back and clean this up. We'll do the short-term fix now, but I've got to be able to clean this up, Mr. Tech Lead, and you're not going to stop me, right? Next week, I'm going to clean this up, and that will be my project next week. Otherwise, I'm not doing this. And so there are some times when you have to do that kind of negotiation.
But how to make them understand the importance of clean code? I mean, how will I convince them that this code will also not get rot like the existing code base when it scales?
I think, Bob, maybe another way to phrase it is, and I hate to say it, but it's frank but more straight to the point. Maybe the tech lead is not competent, right? He doesn't understand what the clean code is, right? And it just thinks, oh no, this is a waste of time to fiddle with it, right? That's probably the thinking there. I would assume. I've only experienced it maybe once or twice.
I suppose that's possible. I mean, some people become tech leads and they don't deserve to be tech leads. I've encountered that in the past as well. But the question that Sandeep is asking is a very interesting one. How do you justify that clean code is not going to rot long term? And there's a real simple answer to that one, which is I'm going to write tests. And those tests will keep that code from rotting, because once I have a set of tests that I trust, I can clean that code up trivially. It's very easy to clean up code that has a set of tests. There is also no way to write clean code unless you have tests. Nobody writes clean code. The way you get to clean code is you write bad code and you write tests, and then you use the tests to help you clean up the bad code. That's always the way that works. So just the idea that you're going to write clean code means that you are also going to be writing tests that allow you to keep that code clean, allow you to clean it at first and keep it clean in the end.
That means clean code without test doesn't mean anything.
Clean code without test doesn't exist. You can't write clean code. No one writes clean code. No one has the capacity in their brain to solve the problem at the same time they're writing something clean. The only thing you can do is solve the problem. And that means you're going to make a mess. And then once you've solved the problem and you've got the mess, if you have tests, then you can clean that up. Then you can make it much, much better. It's the same thing with writing a thesis. Nobody writes the thesis starting at word 1 and ending at the end and thinking, oh, it's perfect. You have to go back over it and reword it and restructure it. It's the same with code. Code is a creative endeavor, just like writing an article or a thesis or a letter. And you have to have tests in code in order to do that cleanup safely.
I think, Bob, here you're even putting me to myself to shame to myself, because I know that I know that I'm not always writing tests first, and even though I am advocating for all of this my entire career, or as soon as I learned it, it's so interesting. I just kind of thought came to my mind, I sometimes I do refactor, right? I will write the code first, I do refactor it, but I will not write tests first.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm in the middle of something right now and it's very simple. And I could go off and I could write unit tests, but it's very simple and I can just kind of step by step make it work. And I'm not writing tests for it. I know I might pay for that, but I'm willing to take that risk because it's something small and easy. If I have to go back and refactor it, I will start writing tests first, because otherwise I'll lose control.
Right, indeed.
All of these rules, all these agile rules and test-driven development rules and pair programming rules, all these rules are flexible and mushy, right? They're good rules. There's always reasons why you don't do them sometimes. A good programmer, a good architect is always evaluating what the best way to proceed is. And most of the time, the best way to proceed is to follow all the rules pretty well. But sometimes you go to the side and say, well, I don't need to do that this time, or I don't need to do that this time. I can make a few exceptions. I can break the rules from time to time. And you need to know when to do that, when it's safe to do that, when it's advantageous to do that, and what you're going to do when your decision is wrong, which it will sometimes be.
What is your advice on, I don't even know how to phrase it, I guess, like, let's say you started in a brand new, so most of the time we struggle with legacy projects, right? There was something already written and unfortunately have to make, or fortunately, right, that makes the business that pays you now. Great. But you have to maintain that code, right? So we covered that part. But then let's say you start in brand new project and it's 3 of us on the project, right? We're making an iOS app with some sort of a backend and API thing, right? What could we do to ensure that this new project starts clean and keeps being clean? Is it all back to tests, I suppose, right? And all these practices?
Yeah, well, it's back to the set of rules that the 3 of you agree to follow. So you all look at each other before the project starts and say, okay, how are we going to proceed? We're going to follow the test-driven development discipline. We're going to pair a bit. We're going to break this up into 1-week-long iterations. We're going to follow this set of rules. And then it's your commitment to follow that set of rules most of the time. When you have to break a rule, the 3 of you get together and say, I'm breaking this rule. And everybody goes, okay, fine. And for a day or 2, maybe you're breaking that rule, and then you go back and follow the rules. I started a project in the year 2000. And the name of that project, it was Fitness, which is still out there. It's an acceptance testing framework that acts like a wiki, sort of a wiki acceptance testing framework. And the batch of us who started writing it sat down and we made a set of rules. And that set of rules lasted for, well, at least 10 years. I left the project. I don't know if the guys are following those rules anymore. But while we were together on that project, we followed those rules, not perfectly, but almost perfectly, for 10 years. That way, I mean, the project started clean, it proceeded clean, it wound up in a clean state. 10 years later, it wasn't perfect. It was pretty good, though.
Something more pressing for me personally right now. The notion of the whole team from Agile, right? And we already touched it many times throughout this conversation, that the whole team owns the tickets, right? And the software itself and delivers it, and it drives a lot of good behaviors and practices if you follow that pair programming and so on. Now, joining a new team that does not have that practice yet, but let's say malleable enough and willing to try new things. I'm a team lead, right, on the project currently. What do you think how do you think I could deliver this idea to engineers that, guys, collaborate, you own this, right? If someone's stuck, you're out of your tickets for the sprint, you can help someone else who's still working on the ticket, right? Like the idea that you own it, not your assigned ticket, but the whole thing together. I just found it to be difficult to explain, as I guess.
Yeah, it's very difficult to explain, especially if these are ideas that are new to them. Gradual introduction is one way. Don't dump everything on them all at once. Pick one topic and very gradually bring it in. Always be as encouraging as possible. Never negative. If you're a team lead, you don't want to. The times when you have to be negative as a team lead should be extremely rare, and are almost always going to end in disaster anyway. So you want to always be encouraging, always be helpful. Pair programming is a really good example of that. You, as the team lead, can pair with everybody. And you can create that kind of culture. And then you, as you're pairing with someone, you can say, hey, you over there, sit down with this person and work, because I need to go over there. And you can kind of inculcate that thought process. If you are the team lead, you can pair with people and show them how to write tests. Initially, it's just a simple little thing. Yeah, sometimes you can write these tests, but bit by bit, that can grow into full-fledged test-driven development. Another way to look at this is nobody likes to be told what to do. Everybody likes to be told what you expect. And so you can state what you want in terms of expectations. I expect that functions are going to be generally small. I expect that I should be able to run a set of tests and demonstrate that the program works properly. A whole set of expectations that you have of the team that are perfectly reasonable. And then they can figure out how to meet those expectations. And of course, the way they meet those expectations is following a set of rules that either you help them discover or they discover for themselves.
So do not throw clean code book at them and tell them, read it by tomorrow.
Yeah. I know some people have done that, and every time that's $1 in my pocket, but probably not the best approach. This is the way we're going to work from now on, everybody. When you do that to people, they're going to rebel, or at least, 70% of them are going to rebel. And then you've got a real problem on your hands. But if they see you reading the book,
right,
they can ask you, hey, what are you reading? Oh, yeah. It's an old weird psychology thing that programmers don't like to get into.
I think something like that happened with me at the previous company. I did throw books at them, and specifically lots of clean code, clean architecture, and so on. Needless to say, I got fired for myriad of different reasons. But I suppose that might have been one of them. I did have support from the management, though, to do such a thing. Seemingly was a great, but
yeah. It's easy to get management. If you're a team lead, it's easy to get management support for things like that because management has to trust you. That's why they made you a team lead. And then if that screws up, well, then they won't trust you anymore and you'll be fired. By the way, I've been fired too, so it's not something that is that uncommon.
Yeah. Just be good at your craft and you'll be able to find a new job. Sooner or later, depends on the market, but you will be able to. Okay, all right, Bob. We've got a bunch of, let me find them, a bunch of different questions for you, which are not on the topic, not necessarily on the topic what we've talked about thus far, but let's see. And you don't have to elaborate too much, maybe one short answer, yes, no, one sentence. That's up to you. So number one, what's your opinion on Swift and Objective-C? Since, well, at least I know you're familiar with Objective-C, I believe. Maybe you work with Swift a little bit. What are your thoughts on those languages?
Objective-C was a language that never should have been put into the iPhone in the first place. It's a very old language invented in 1980 by Brad Cox, long time ago. So they should have picked a better language up front. And then when they decided to go to Swift, I think they went the wrong direction. The world was going dynamic and they went static. And I think that was the wrong approach as well. So I'm not a real big fan of either of those two programming language systems for the iPhone. I think that's a shame.
Makes sense. Okay, so next one. What do you think about Swift UI?
I don't know anything about Swift UI.
Yeah. It's a new library from Apple.
Okay, yeah, don't know anything about it.
On iOS, yeah. Okay. What are your thoughts on Twitter's acquisition by Elon Musk and all of that happened?
I think that might save the world. Temporarily. all the social networks were spinning down the drain. Most of us who were libertarian minded had lost any kind of faith in the social networks. Elon Musk buying Twitter reestablished some trust, but most of us are looking for a much better solution. So I've been actively working on a networking environment called Nostr, which is a completely distributed environment that nobody owns, nobody can own. There's no possibility of censorship or anything. It's just a Wild West, open, free-for-all exchange, which is where I think the world is going to end up. I don't know how Elon Musk can keep control over Twitter long term. The forces of censorship are growing and they will continue. And eventually, even Twitter will have to cave.
Well, I still hope that won't happen. But yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah, me too. Me too. But
Mhm.
there are significant powers that are attempting to clamp down on Twitter and the entire internet. And so we need a better solution.
Makes sense. Makes sense. What are your thoughts on ChatGPT and AI advancements lately? Of course, we have to ask that one.
Lots of hype, not a lot of substance. So the programs themselves are masterpieces. They're extremely impressive, very well done. It's a lot of fun to chat with ChatGPT and drive it into paroxysms of logical inconsistency. That's a load of fun. It is not a revolution that's going to change the world. Nobody's job is threatened by this. Marketing people are not going to be fired because ChatGPT does better marketing copy. Programmers are not going to be fired because ChatGPT writes better code. If you've ever asked it to write code, you can vouch for that yourself. Yeah, I think it's much more hype, much more heat than noise. You know, it's just a great thing to fill up headlines right now. Good clickbait.
Mhm. It's also with you there. I'm a little annoyed, to be honest, by the hype, but
Yeah, hype. That's part of our business.
What do you think about Conway's Law? I believe is the name. It's your system will reflect this architecture of your system will reflect the structure of the organization or something like that, right? If you're familiar with it.
Yeah, Conway's Law.
What do you think? Is it very much true all the time? And how, I suppose, with clean code, you have emergent design, right, and agile practices. How does that play, I suppose, together?
So I think Conway's Law is incontrovertible. I'm trying to remember if it's Conway or if it's a name similar to Conway. But yeah, the architecture of your application will reflect the architecture of your organization. And I think that's incontrovertible. If you have three teams, you know, a UI team, a middleware team, and a backend team, then the architecture of your system is going to be UI, middleware, and backend. That's just the way that's going to work. The interesting thing about that is that if you want a different software architecture, you need to organize the teams differently because the team structure is still going to drive the architecture.
Very, very true. There is also so much we can talk about it there some other time. Okay, let's see. In some of your lectures, I don't think in all of them, I have not seen all of them, but I've seen many, watched many. In some of them, you have like an introduction, some unrelated, if you will, story to the actual topic of the presentation, right? How do you learn about those things?
Oh, how do I learn that stuff?
Yeah.
I read all kinds of stuff. I'm a very avid reader. I like to read about science. And so I have a vast reservoir of scientific trivia in my brain that I can pull out and do a 5-minute lecture on. I started doing that 30 years ago when I was teaching very long C++ courses. They'd be 5-day courses, 9 to 5, and I would break every hour to let everybody go to the bathroom. And then in order to get them all to sit down and shut up, I would start lecturing for 5 minutes on some topic that was not germane. And by the time I was done, they were all sitting and listening to me, and then I could start the real lecture again. And after I did that for several years, it became a kind of trademark. So if I'm on stage, you will see me do that.
I think this feeds into the next question, which is how are you good at the lectures and presentations that you make? Which I suppose one probably is you have so much practice doing it. But any advice for me and Sandeep and other people who would not necessarily give in presentations like you, but would try to teach people, right, through the podcast and other means?
The most important thing about giving a talk, most important thing about making a talk successful is to have fun while you're giving the talk. If you're enjoying yourself, the audience will enjoy themselves along with you. If you are having a ball up there, they will have a ball right along with you. If you are nervous and scared, they're going to be nervous and scared, right? It's a real simple formula. And so you have to figure out a way to get up there and just have the time of your life. Now, that may be a personality defect, which I happen to have, right? I love being on stage. Put me on stage and I'm having a ball no matter what I'm doing. Right? But you can learn that through practice. You can learn that by getting comfortable on stage. You can learn. I will practice a talk while I'm riding my bicycle through the woods. I'll spend an hour riding my bicycle through the woods, and I will go over and over and over the various parts of the talk that I want to do and anticipate questions and answer those questions. I will just go through hours of that and enjoy the hell out of it while I'm riding my bike through the woods, practicing a talk. And then I'm on stage and it's just like I'm riding my bike and I'm having a great time.
It's very interesting. Lots of practice.
Lots of practice.
Makes sense. Okay, so for the last part, we've got, I think, 3 questions from the audience, which we posted on LinkedIn prior to this call that will have you over. And we've got 3 questions from different engineers, I believe all of them. And Sandeep, I think you've got them, right?
Yeah. So first question we have from Roy, 18. He's saying, "Dear Uncle Bob, how do you see the future of iOS development evolving in terms of clean architecture and clean code practices?"
Well, I'm not an iOS developer. I don't know what the iOS culture is. I don't know how that's going to evolve in terms of clean code and clean architecture. I have my suspicions, however, that Apple is at a precipice where they're going to have to make some very interesting decisions. The App Store is far too restrictive. There are applications that you would like to put in the App Store that they will simply reject out of hand because it violates their rules. And that's a problem that they're going to have to address. I know they've resisted it forever, but at some point they're going to have to address it, and they're going to have to open up the platform and allow different languages and different ways of working. That's how I think Apple's going to go. When that happens, I don't know, but it's going to have to happen. The platform is going to have to be opened up, and you'll have to be able to write Java or Clojure or Ruby or Python or other apps that run in the iPhone, and the App Store is not going to be able to throw them out.
Okay. So the second question he asked is, as a junior developer, it can sometimes be overwhelming to balance delivering high quality code while meeting tight deadlines. What strategies or tips do you have for managing this pressure and maintaining a focus on clean code?
Yeah, well, believe me, that's not just a problem for junior developers. That's a problem for everybody. And the tips and the strategies are very simple. You do the best job you can, always. You always do the best job you can under the circumstances that you're faced with. And you do not compromise to those who say, well, don't write tests, don't do this, don't do that, because you'll go faster if you do, because you won't go faster.
Okay. So second, we have a second guy who asked, his name is Tom Rigler. He asked, we use clean architecture everywhere since his company, Logic Room, first introduced him to Uncle Bob ages ago. His question is, which solid principle is it most acceptable to compromise on in a short-term project?
Which solid principle should you compromise on most acceptably in a short-term project? If I had to compromise, well, let me do this differently. Which one did I compromise on most recently? Most recently, I faced a situation where being Liskov compliant with one particular interface was going to be more expensive than I wanted to accept. And so I accepted a Liskov substitution violation in my code rather than go through the work of segregating the interfaces properly and keeping that clean. And I thought, you know what? This is probably worth the risk. Now, I don't know if there is one principle that is always the one that is most acceptable to compromise. I will say that I have compromised all of them at one point or another, because this is engineering after all, and engineering is all about trade-offs.
The last question we had from Christian Cordoso. He says he read another book after reading your clean code book, and he's confused that you recommend that shorter functions are generally easier to understand than the longer ones. But he's arguing after reading from another book that since more functions will mean more interfaces to document and learn. So he says that it is better to keep the larger function so that all the related code remains at one place. So yeah, what's your take on it?
Well, all right. The first part of that was that smaller functions create more interfaces that have to be documented and learned. Well, that's true, but if you don't separate those functions out, you don't have those interfaces documented and learned. They're still there. All that code is still there. Those interfaces are now undocumented and hidden. So it is better to expose them in a set of small functions with well-named functions and well-designed interfaces and documented interfaces if that documentation is necessary. Then the second part of that was, it's better to keep the code all together. Well, yes, I agree with that, but all together does not mean all together in the same function. All together means together in the same module, ordered nicely so that it's easy to find the functions you need to call or that you need to understand. It is always easier to understand something small than it is to understand something large. And very often it is much better to separate things into small little bits, because you can take the trivial details and pull them out into separate functions, low-level functions that nobody will ever have to read because they understand what those details are. And they can read instead the high-level code that you've pulled all that stuff out of. So I disagree with his premise, and I don't know what book you read. I'd like to know what book that is, so that I can write a blog about that book.
All right. I think this is it for this recording. Bob, thank you again for coming. We have utmost admiration for you and your work. Has been a blast for me personally. It's always good to hear you and actually interact with you this time. Not just through the lecture and trying to absorb it all.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's been fun.
Hi again. Thanks for listening to this interview and podcast with my dad, Robert Martin. You can find out more information about what Bob is doing at www.cleancoder.com. You can also contact me through that website if you're interested in bringing Bob out to you for lectures or courses, or if you want more information about that master's course I told you about at the beginning of the podcast.
Subscribe and hit that notification button so you never miss the next episode.